I am here today as someone who was poisoned by a damp, moldy school. I was the school librarian. I worked 13 years in a toxic environment with constant water infiltration. For over 5 years of those years, I worked with no ceiling tiles. Custodians were tired of replacing them. In the spring of 2004, I began fainting at work. After 13 years of promises the leaking would stop, the school's custodians attempted renovations. They tore up the often wet carpeting, they carried out particle board shelving, and 14,000 books. They used no negative air machines, no containment. They put down tile and they brought back in the particle board shelving and the 14,000 books that had been in there all those years, and then I had to put them back in order. Following these renovations, I worked 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. for roughly 2 weeks, trying to put 14,000 books back in order to open the school library. This plunged my already poor health into a severe downturn. Those last months of the school year, I was constantly coughing and gasping for air. I had difficulty focusing. I had numbness in my fingers and toes. I was dizzy, and finally my body collapsed. The workers' comp courts, including the appellate division, found me disabled due to, quote, occupational presence of fungi. I've gone from an involved, very busy parent and community member to almost a recluse. Now I suffer from multiple organ chemical intolerance, and I can't process petroleum byproducts or chemical synthetic fragrance so prevalent in this room right now. I used to enjoy fun times up close with my children and my partner John. I used to work the Sullivan County Community College reference desk on the night shift. I attended family reunions and weddings, can't do that now. I was at school functions, ran plays, I was in equity theater productions, I sang in area clubs, I introduced nationwide musical acts and cues outdoor stages, and now recluse. I pretty much housebound, and when I got ill, my partner and my 10th grader moved out. When my family comes to see me, in order to maintain my best health, they put on clothing I've washed, they walk through these doors, and they usually have to wear a hat like I'm wearing now. When they cover their head, I avoid lung pains from breathing in the synthetic fragrances, and that's what my daughter's doing in the photo. My kids leave their clothing with me and I wash it because theirs gets coated in the dryer sheet chemicals from the dorm laundries at Columbia and at Syracuse where my girls go. My salary was $84,000 a year. Now I get $400 a week. The most workers' comp will give anybody. On that, $1,600 a month, I can't afford to pay $1,200 a month family health premiums anymore. So I only pay the $600 for myself, and I've dropped my girls. My health bills are so high I can't afford to drop myself. I come here today at great physical and financial cost. I do it because I want to give you a visual to a life totally altered by mold. And unabated mold infiltrations over many, many years. I'm a victim of negligence, greed, and ignorance. My current condition was preventable, brought on by a series of mistakes. I don't know who chose you guys for this panel, but I do hope you don't feel overqualified to ignore the stories of those of us coping with it daily. This is only a tiny peek into my life that I've lived the last 4 years ruined by mold. The first mistake that occurred in my downfall was the school design. The school was built with a flat roof, on a wetland, into a hill. The back wall was buried 14 feet deep and seeped water on the first floor. The library was partially under a greenhouse and had skylights. There was random leaking down structural posts. There was a skylight that leaked. Architects found that the flashing in the roof was put in backwards. There were many design faults. The week before the school opened, the board minutes The negative health assessment by NYS is on their website still today, complete with many pictures. But, so what? NYS has no clout. There is no penalty to the school district that neglected to maintain a safe working environment for me. Not only were they not penalized, they've actually been rewarded because I was fired and my replacement makes 30 grand less a year than I would be making now. Mold exposure should not be an inventive way of skimming off the most experienced and higher-paid employees of any workforce. The top book over there is the ACGIH's, you probably all know, Bioaerosol Assessment and Control. Their section 15.5 says about judging proper remediation effectiveness, ultimate criterion for the adequacy of abatement efforts for treating biological contamination is the ability for people to occupy or reoccupy the space without health complaints or physical discomfort. No health assessments were ever done, ever. There were no preventative mechanisms in place, and there has been no accountability since, period. Although I must accommodate myself in all facets of my daily life now with this new physical condition I have, my employer didn't have to accommodate me. They expected me to occupy the library space because I was fired. In the past 4 years of court hearings and delays due to constant appealing of my wins, I have lived over 11 months, twice now, with no income. Nothing. How long would you last? I have an exposure-driven illness. The only way I don't suffer is to control my environment. It's no surprise that I've lived mostly housebound for over 3 years. There won't be any change until, 1, there are regulations and fines for school regarding safe breathing conditions. Children are mandated to go to school, yet no one is mandated to make sure they're breathing safely. Schools with budget restraints are not going to voluntarily spend any money without mandates, inspectors, or blasters. There is no change in schools without some fiscal threat. 2, laws should protect workers and not employers. 3, industrial hygienists should be bound professionally to give the best assessment possible and speak directly to those affected following the American Government Conference of Industrial Hygienists Rules of Proper Abatement, and not just disappear with school cover-up money and say everything's fine. I know many examples of this. 4, experts need to study the effects of mycotoxins, and if not directly, testing for these using intelligent analytical basis for determining probable exposures. This goes beyond science infections and watery eyes. This is toxic poisoning, systemic toxic poisoning, weakening the blood-brain barrier, etc. And 5, doctors need to admit they have lived mycotoxins, and if not directly, testing for these using intelligent analytical basis for determining probable exposures. This goes beyond science infections and watery eyes. This is toxic poisoning, systemic toxic poisoning, weakening the blood-brain barrier, etc. And 5,